This is the Phillips curve, one of the most popular and powerful concepts in economics. And this is Milton Friedman. And this video is about how Friedman changed economics forever by killing the Phillips curve. Let's start with a flashback. It's 1958 and a guy from New Zealand discovers something weird. When wages increase quickly, unemployment is low. And when wages rise slowly, unemployment is high. Cue a few years later and two future Nobel laureates, Robert Solow and Paul Samuelson, create the Phillips curve, showing that higher inflation, i.e. faster increases in prices, is associated with lower unemployment, while high unemployment generally means you have low inflation. The profession was convinced. It seems like central bankers and governments around the world faced a trade-off. Do you want unemployment to be low? Then you're going to have to tolerate rising prices. Want to stop insane hyperinflation? Then people will have to lose their jobs. And it made sense. It really did. Economists are hardwired to think that we live in a world of trade-offs. You can't just have nice things without giving something up. And look, besides the data confirming the Phillips curve, we had theoretical reasoning that backed it up. Consider this. You have a company. You see a worker asking for $15 an hour. When are you more likely to hire them? When inflation is 0% or 10%? The answer is 10%. Because with 10% inflation, he'll basically be getting a wage decrease within a year. So the logic of the Phillips curve makes sense. And this, dear listener, is the point where you ask,
wait a minute!
Didn't Phillips discover a relationship between wage increases and unemployment? This inflation thing sounds like some weird switcheroo. And I say, shut up and listen to the rest of the video. I'll get to that. So basically everybody in the 60s was convinced that governments could choose between different points in the Phillips curve, offering different combinations of inflation and unemployment. Well, basically everyone except for this one guy called Milton Friedman, who in December of 1967 gave a presidential address to the American Economic Association titled The Role of Monetary Policy. Friedman stressed the importance of expectations in monetary policy and how it could shatter the Phillips curve. More specifically, he explained that governments were indeed capable of lowering unemployment through raising inflation, but that this only applied in the short run. Sure, at first, higher inflation meant that firms would be willing to hire more workers because they'd essentially be getting wage cuts each year. But in the long run, people would start to expect inflation. So maintaining 10% inflation every year meant that workers would ask firms for a 10% wage increase every year. The logic of the Phillips curve would collapse. You get high inflation without low unemployment. To fix this conundrum, the Federal Reserve would be forced to raise interest rates high, resulting in a recession and a period of both high unemployment and inflation, i.e. stagflation. Only after a period of pain could things go back to normal. Unfortunately for the world, Friedman was soon proven right. Before the 1972 election, Richard Nixon took the United States off the Bretton Woods gold standard and pressured then Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns to conduct easy monetary policy. Basically, print money. His goal was to lower unemployment and make it easier to get elected. As you may know, the strategy worked and Nixon coasted to victory in 72, but the US faced rising inflation and, by 1975, 9% unemployment. Seems like the Phillips curve logic collapsed on its head. This crisis kept going for a while longer until Paul Volcker became chairman of the Federal Reserve. Volcker raised interest rates extremely high, leading to a huge burst of unemployment. By the time we got to around 1983, inflation had come down and the Fed could start loosening policy. This also coincided with Reagan's famous Morning in America, where he basically took credit for the improved economic conditions. So Friedman's predictions bore fruit. It's actually a bit insane. Economists are generally terrible at making predictions, especially about the future. But Milton was able to see through the smoke of the Phillips curve and understand that what truly drove unemployment was not inflation, but the difference between expected and actual inflation. Firms would only hire additional people if those people did not ask for higher raises, i.e. did not expect inflation. This idea was soon integrated into mainstream economics and we see it everywhere today. It's called the expectations augmented Phillips curve, where in the vertical axis you don't put inflation, but put inflation minus its expectation. But economic fallacies never die. And even during the inflation scare the last few years, prominent economists such as Larry Summers believed that inflation could only fall if unemployment rose, which is, based on old Phillips curve reasoning. Whereas new Phillips curve reasoning told us that we could be okay because people didn't expect inflation to get out of whack. And really, this is what happened. Since 2021, inflation has fallen significantly with no rise in unemployment. Anyway, I know that I also promised you an explanation of how wage increases affected unemployment, since that's what Phillips originally wrote. So basically, this video was made possible with help from the University of Georgia, bringing quality education to Georgia and beyond.